Good morning and thanks so much for tuning into the trade setup. I'm Neeraj Shah and let's take stock of the situation. The global news flow first. China has tightened COVID zero measures as cases climb. So this policy of China remains completely unpredictable. Stocks in Asia are trying to follow Wall Street higher ahead of the Fed minutes. And in terms of oil news flow, Saudi Arabia has said that OPEC Plus was sticking with output cuts. So much as there was a lot of talk of they going ahead with an increase in output, which led to a fall in crude prices, Saudi Arabia has confirmed quite the opposite. So be mindful of that. Oil prices have inched a little bit higher. Now, what did the world markets up to? Well, US market should come up on your screen first, what they did yesterday. And like I said, Asian markets were trying to follow higher, despite the fact that we will have the Fed minutes coming out later today. Asia is not looking all that bad. The other cues, by the way, in terms of the VIX, CBOE VIX, that is, we know that India VIX is lower, but CBOE VIX or dollar index or US 10-year yield, all of them pretty benign, no great shakes out there. The SGX Nifty should come up on your screen next. And we did well yesterday, by the way, mind you, while the other markets were a bit iffy, and the SGX Nifty will come up soon. And there is a bit of a positivity out there relative to what we've seen the last few days. So about 67 odd points higher at open. I mean, yesterday we closed well, but we didn't open as strongly, or the indications were not as strong as they are yesterday. This is also not tremendous trend, but just that a little bit of green on the screen. What's the trade setup? I think you have to attribute it to banks, right? Banks are just continuing to drive the markets higher. It is the banking index, which is largely responsible for the markets capping the downsides or actually having some bit of upsides. In fact, India VIX has declined another 6.5% to close at about 13.84, which are levels last seen in September 2021. That's quite a staggering thing. And then at the broader end of the spectrum, while on the large cap side, specific indices might be volatile, real estate as an index might be volatile, etc. That one pocket which continues to do well is PSU Banks. And when you speak to brokerages, insti or retail, you will figure out that everybody is constructive on PSU Banks. Yesterday, we spoke to, or day before yesterday, right? We spoke to Sridhar Sivram of Enam. They are constructive on PSU Banks. Last week, a bunch of conversations constructive on PSU Banks. Motilal Oswal talking about some bit of constructive stance on PSU Banks. So large, mid, small, everybody seems to be very constructive on PSU Banks. They've had a bit of a rally already behind them, mind you, but people are still constructive. The other thing is, while autos may be looking slightly wobbly the last 2 weeks, I saw that tractor companies have actually had a fairly decent outing, and there is merit there. There is quite a bit of fanfare. Escorts was yesterday at 52-week highs. VST tillers and tractors had given a good guidance. That stock has inched above 2,400. So there is some bit of slightly different than the sector behavior in tractors. And remember, autos is a very diverse sector. While four-wheelers may have done okay, two-wheelers have hardly done well. So it's a very diverse sector, and tractors can still do well even if the other auto segments aren't. But it's interesting what these companies have done in the last few days. Escorts in particular, post that analyst meet and the guidance given, has been a smart runner the last couple of sessions. So do watch out for those names. What about stocks to monitor in the session today? That's the key thing, right? In terms of news flow, and a fair degree of news flow. Maybe not something which is dramatically large, but fair degree, but fair. Now, there is an error here. It's not a preview. It is. Let's stick with those numbers. It's okay. Just discount the fact that we calling it a preview. It's not a preview. But revenues have been up 8.4% at 4,657 crores. EBITDA margin is at 11.1 versus 10.4%. PAT is up 102% at 652 crores. Mind you, compared to a few estimates, the revenue numbers are a bit lower. But one would suspect that this is not a bad quarter for them, therefore. Irrespective of that, order inflows were at about 4,009 crores, which is up about 25% YOY, and order backlog at 17,183 crores, therefore. And again, not a bad number at all. So actually, you would argue that Siemens has actually done pretty well. So just the point that The energy segment execution was a bit lower, and which is why compared to estimates, the numbers were a bit weak. So that is one thing to monitor. Then let's move on to some stocks in news. And Adani Enterprises would be one that people would be watching out for because on November 25th, there is a board meet to consider raising of funds through various means, including a QIP. So that is something to watch out for. And Nykaa, while yesterday the stock was in focus because of the supply, the CFO Arvind Agarwal has resigned to pursue other opportunities in the digital economy and the startup space. Does this lend itself to further pressure for Nykaa? Maybe, maybe not. I think in Nykaa's case, Falguni Nair is such a dominating presence that 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 maybe this will not have that big an impact. But let's wait and watch. Could be in focus today as well. Some other stock in news include a Vedanta, when the board has approved the third interim dividend for FY23 at about 17.5 rupees per share. Now here, viewers, just before I move on to the other stocks in news, on Vedanta, Citi has a sell. They have said the outflow thus far amounting to about 3.2 billion versus dividend received at 1.25 billion. And while dividend yield remains attractive versus Citi estimates, it may not be enough to, particularly if the commodity prices stagnate or fall given the group leverage. So brokerages are not that bullish on Vedanta, but the dividend is higher than what people were working with. Then Balaji Amines is in focus because subsidiary Balaji Specialty Chemicals has gotten the SEBI nod for the IPO. Hindustan Construction Company, why you should keep it on your radar is that this is the last tranche of selling that is happening at an institutional level, which is from IDBI Trusteeship Services. Once this is gone, a lot of people are saying that it's a stock that you should keep on your radar. So once the selling is over, I think it could be an interesting one to monitor. So most certainly, watch out for HCC as well. Time Technoplast, the company said consolidation come restructuring of overseas business is progressing at final stage of negotiation or discussion with the prospective investor. Maybe this is good news for Time Techno, so something to watch out for. I thought the deals in Keynes Technology was interesting. See, a lot of these companies are looking very expensive, but Value Quest is Ravi Dharamshi's firm. They have bought in some shares. Norges Bank, Nomura, Goldman Sachs, all of these have bought into Keynes Technology yesterday. Around, I actually had different prices, right? 705, 751, 764. The fair degree of buying that happened in Keynes Technology yesterday. So that is something, a stock to monitor as well. Since it's a recent listing, almost all data points about that one are known, but certainly just the nature of the buying that has happened and the fact that it has happened across the price points is pretty interesting. Remember, the stock ended lower. So it's ended at 690. So it's actually much lower than the pricing at which all of these have bought into Keynes. So that is something to definitely monitor. Keynes Technology. Please do your research though. Just because some funds or some smart investors have bought into it doesn't mean that they can't be wrong. So please buy it only if you've done your research. But I thought it was important to highlight this. Now, this yesterday at 4:30 p.m. was the virtual meeting for the policy on gaming and casinos, for the GST policy on gaming and casinos. Now, my colleague Janani Janardhanan has put out this story on our website. The long and short of it is, there is no consensus which was attained with respect to taxing casinos. West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh have given one policy. Goa has given another policy recommendation, and therefore no consensus as yet. So no bad news, no good news as far as casinos go. So Delta Corp's principal business is okay. Then, of course, the online gaming business, because of which Nazara has about 6% exposure and Delta has an IPO coming out. So the third line, which is on online gaming and which is all the 1 to 3 poker, etc. There's the absence of consensus again on whether the tax should be levied on only the fees charged by the portal or the entire consideration, including the bet amount. Remember, if the decision is that it will be entire consideration, including the bet amount, it will virtually kill all of these companies. So doubt that then that industry can survive. But there is a belief that these are sin goods, and therefore you never know what the taxation comes out like. On horse racing, there is a belief that 28% GST is expected to be calculated on the full value of bets placed with the bookmaker on horse racing. Well, that could actually be very expensive for people who bet on horse racing. So that is to be watched out for. There is sources have put out the October DEMAT edition numbers, and apparently Angel One has been Grow and Angel One. So Grow, of course, also is a sponsor of this piece that you're watching. But Grow and Angel One have had very large numbers. Growth, Paytm, okay. The listed ones, which is aside of Angel One, 5paisa, IFL Sec, ICICI Sec, all of them have lost customers. The DEMAT edition numbers have been on a comparative basis not the strongest, and that's the point. Sorry, these numbers are mistaken. They've not been put out rightly. The top three were the positive ones. The lower five were the negative ones. So we've had a bad day with graphics, I must say. Please excuse us for that. So that's the number chart on brokerages. Have I missed out on anything? UBS, by the way, has a positive note on Maruti, so that is something to be watched out for. What else? Am I missing something? Like I said, oh yeah, the big news, of course, the India-Australia FTA. So that is something that should be viewed constructively. CLSA has come out with a note on cement. They are saying that the management commentary on demand was mostly upbeat with regards to margins having likely bottomed out, and the medium-term demand outlook is positive. Expect about 6 to 8% CAGR growth there. So, well, one more thing to monitor is a query about what to do with export-oriented chemical companies. Well, there are mixed views here. If anything, some of the companies are actually, Tushar, some of the companies might actually benefit because European operations are very expensive. So companies which have a European operation themselves might be finding it expensive, but European companies which have shut down those operations for the time being because of the higher gas costs might actually be importing from India. So that's the net positive. Just the fact that they've had a bumper last 2 years wherein UK and US were importing, and Europe also to a certain extent was importing quite a bit. And if indeed these companies go into a recessionary phase, then there could be an issue for these companies. That is a key point. Now, for example, a company like Vinati Organics might actually benefit because of the oil and gas construction happening around the world. If at all there is some new capacity or refurbishment of capacity is happening, so that should be positive for a company like Vinati. So it's mixed bag really. It's not a homogeneous sector, very bottom up. So be mindful of that. Are Indian markets fully priced in? You would argue from a valuation perspective, yes. But if you're looking, Harsha Vardhan, at what could be happening in the future, maybe not. I mean, a bunch of conversations with Rhythm Desai, with Neelkan Mishra, etc., all are sounding constructive. Though I must say, at the UBS conference, their strategists mentioned that they are negative on Indian markets currently because of the valuations. So you would argue that purely on the current valuations, they are pricing in a lot of positives. Views on Bezos' comments on likely recession. Yep, I mean, you don't doubt people like Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett when they are saying something. They have better insights than you or me or anybody else sitting on the chairs that we are in. So you've got to give credence to that. Does India weather that US recession slightly better than some of the other countries? You'd probably argue that maybe so, because the domestic cycle is looking very strong in India at least. Corporate balance sheets are not leveraged. Banks' balance sheets are primed for growth, and therefore that juggernaut on the domestic economy should hold India better than what some of the pure export-oriented countries might do. So yeah, I mean, I would believe what men of the stature of Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and even Elon Musk have to say. They understand that side of the economy much better than any of us could do from here. But nevertheless, that's the long and short of the trade setup today. A bunch of very interesting conversations. Ayaz Motiwala joins in of Nivalis. We'll talk to him about the slowdown in the FMCG names in India today. So that's a very interesting conversation. We continue with the defense theme. We spoke to Mazgon Doc on Monday. We speak to Munjal Shah of Paras Defense today. And of course, the mutual fund show, Ashish Somaya joins in to talk about how our fund flow situation from the retail side and what should retail investors do. And Anand Ladda and Poonam Rumta talk about where to park your short-term money. If your money is lying into your bank account or a fixed deposit, are there better mutual fund options out there? We talk about that today on the MF show. I want to tune in for that. And thanks so much for tuning in to the Trade Setup today.